Yo, what's up guys? Bit of a different video today. No dungeon guide, no unit showcase, but a documentary about the history of giants farming all the way from 2014 until 2026. Let me know in the comments which was your favorite team and when did you start playing. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, let me know in the comments and I might also do this for dragons or other dungeons. The year is 2014. The game just released. No one has any rune quality. No one has any 5 stars, or at least not that many 5 stars yet. And definitely people do not have artifacts, and people are trying to clear the highest dungeon out. The highest dungeon at that moment was the Giants B10, which was very difficult at that time because, as mentioned, no rune quality, no nothing, no Lucians, no proper teams, no skill ups, pretty much nothing to go for. So what good people do is actually make those imps. And why did they use those imps? Well, the imps provided enough damage output where you just provided enough dots that with 2 rotations of the boss, if you landed all of your dots, if you did not land all of your dots, you would still die. Plus the protection on the unit on the left itself with the invisibility. 2 turns on the boss would actually break it down all the way to killing it. This was pretty much the only way for people to clear giants. At this time, there were also no exact timers of how long this dungeon run did take. But these runs could take up to 3 or 4 minutes full manualing trying to get your giants runs to work. Plus, at that time, you could also get just simply 4-star runes. But this was the best way of getting your best runes. But you had to play the game on manual and you had to put a lot of effort simply to try to get all of those runes in. But it was definitely very, very time consuming for those players. And I did not even play at that time yet. Skipping ahead to March of 2015. This is the moment where you see more free-to-play teams coming in. This free-to-play team, I could even make the argument, is a free-to-play team that even during this current day and age would be a very sophisticated free-to-play team. Fun fact, Veromos, when Veromos was first introduced, was actually healing 15% per debuff removed. So Veromos was absolutely a menace, was nerfed pretty soon after, but still a super strong unit. Fun fact is also, if Veromos was not free to play, all of y'all would have been liking to summon a Veromos because he's just overall such a great unit in a lot of content, and he's just, well, he's always been there all the way since 2015. This was finally an auto run, however, these runs were definitely particularly slow. This was also for the people with a bit better of rune quality back in 2015. Later on, also for low rune quality, this was more doable. But at the very start, these were kind of the teams that people were aiming for. Fusing that Sigmarus, fusing that Vermos, trying to get your team in. And we're looking at 2 minutes and 40 seconds per run back in those times. Moving ahead to February of 2016, this is where the high-end players had a bit more of 4 stars, also with the skill ups on them, because getting those skill ups was definitely a difficult part. Also, what you did just see, yes, there were 2 waves before the mid-boss, 1 wave after the mid-boss, and then the final boss. So that disabled a bunch of teams such as Julie to be meta at that time. But also at this time, people did not really have the rune quality as of yet to even make that, even if it was possible. But this was definitely on the team where you also threw in like violent runes on your units just to get the highest odds of getting those defense breaks out, because this team in the end could definitely still fail. But it was super fast, about 35 seconds. December of the same year of 2016 also introduced Laika as a unit that was very common in a Giants team. And why was he that common? Well, he simply did not die that easily to the Giants boss. And as you can see over here, this was the time, anytime the boss went for a counter, especially on defense break, instant death on that unit. So all of these runs were very inconsistent because the good odds were that if you don't land the defense break at the right moments, your units derp at the wrong moments, you just simply don't get that in over there. However, you could still dot it, the boss at that moment. So the little bit of chip damage, a little bit of dots, and just bring in Laika all the way to the boss mostly made it where Laika could solo the boss. It could go wrong, however, but it was definitely a meta thing at that time with low rune quality to do still a faster run. And we're looking at runs of about 1 minute. Soon after, in January of 2017, they removed the 4-star drop table from B10 dungeons. So yes, all the way up until now, it was possible to get simply 4-star runes. Maybe you finally get your slot 2 on Swift on speed main. Legendary, but it is a 4-star, so it's still straight up trash after you doing a manual run for 4 minutes. That's depressing, I guess. We came a long way since 2017 January. The year is 2017 in September, and here we also see a little bit of the rune quality that people had back in those days. But we have the introduction of Hua. And why was Hua that good in Giants at the moment? Because of course that is the wrong element. But at this time, which was patched later, pushbacks did not care about elements and therefore did not care about glancing. So even if you glanced, you could still push back the boss. Disabling the boss from getting the turns gave you more freedom to just simply take more hits in, only take hits from the counter, but have a higher odds of your Galleon landing that defense break at some point where you can clear the boss. So once again, the Lucians are hopefully there to amputation magic their way into going for the boss. If not, it's still fine, but we see a defense break miss over there, but you do see the damage coming in is not that big, simply because you have the pushbacks. The only thing that could be bad is if your Hua gets the counter on the 6th turn, which in this case does happen, but at least the boss is at a 0% attack bar pretty close to. You finally land the defense break, you get the attack buff, you get the proper damage in, and then you can go for the clear. So that was the main idea behind Hua in Giants, and that was meta for quite a bit of time, I would say. Runs at this time were about 1 minute. It is September of 2019. I started making more videos, more dungeon guys. And at this point of the September 2019, we changed the dungeons where we only have one wave before mid-boss, then one wave after mid-boss into the boss, which enabled a bunch of teams coming in later. But that update definitely did switch up the meta for dungeon farming altogether. Therefore, in December, we did got Perfect AI State. Funny enough, I did try to look it up. I guess Perfect AI is one of those terms I just came up with out of random on this video, which was a Perfect AI State on the Julie, also on the Sophia, which is the Pirate on Wind, and then also on that Luna. We just had the Abigail over here for the attack lead and fight runes right there, but just trying to get as much damage in as possible and trying to get the right amount of damage. But we have a Julie on the one-shot of the wave. That was the main important thing, which was also pretty much the release of Perfect AI. And even till this day, we still try to get Perfect AI on as much as possible, which just gives consecutive runs that always have about the same speed. And in this case, it was a 25-second run on that B10. It could even go down to 22 to 23-second average, but it kind of depended on how much did your Lin and Luna do for damage. One important factor was also at this time, Luna had to take a double turn on this boss, so you had to work with the right speed ticks where Luna was cutting the units of the Lin and the Abigail. Otherwise, you did not have the skill 3 available on this stage right here, and you would have simply done a lot less damage. The only thing that was still derping at this moment was a Lin on that final position, not dealing enough damage. You could have made this faster, down to 21 seconds, if you had 2 Lunas at this time, but I didn't. However, that was for the very high rune requirement. So now we're in 2020 in February, and we figured out the state where if you have any unit placing any enemy on 30% HP or less, all of your units will consider using their 3rd skill always. And that was the Perfect AI state that we could push Lucian into. And therefore, we had a Julie into Lucian Perfect AI state, which in Julie places the units into the lowest amount of HP possible, or at least 30% or less, which we do see over here. Those are 30% or less. And then Lucia can go up for the cleanup. In this case, we can't use the Luna because we have 3 units move in front of the Luna, whereas with only a Julie one-shot, there would be 1 unit moving in front of the Luna. So therefore, Luna cannot double turn. So therefore, the cleanup units in this case are going to be the twins, Intalia and Sabrina, which still had a very fast run, but it lowered the rune requirements by quite a bit because trying to get your Julie to one-shot at this time was definitely not that easy. You needed pretty good rage runes for that because there were no artifacts as of yet. Runs on these were about 30 seconds. So definitely a fair bit slower than the Perfect AI of Julie one-shotting. Then later that year, on July 30th, we had the biggest update that I have seen myself, which had the most amount of changes, which still some people to this day do not understand. You had 6 years by now. Artifacts. We had the introduction of artifacts over here, but not just artifacts itself. We also had the release of B12 dungeons, which made it a lot harder to farm the B12s as of first. They were nerfed a little bit later. I'm not entirely sure at what time they were nerfed, but on the release of that, we did definitely struggle a bit to kill those. In August of 2020, we did already have some bit of speed teams once again, and those speed teams were revolving around once again getting pushbacks in, getting a lot of debuffs in, doing massive damage with the Crow, but also just once again Lucian, because even a Julie Lucian state was not even remotely close to clearing the waves over here. So also the multiple hits from the Julie just made it where the boss did too many chances for counters, And with those counters, you were dying. You definitely did need your Lauren in here once again. So as you can see over here, I'm just not really dealing the damage. The only proper damage dealer out there is pretty much the Crow. If Crow dies, it takes a bit longer. Therefore, also trying to put the double immunity on the Crow to give it a little bit more chance, even due to the waves, to not get stuns out there. But it is definitely a bit of a tedious fight. B12s were very hard on the release of August of 2020. In which case, the runs that we're doing, I think were just like 45 seconds. They were definitely not really fast. If Lucian went for the right state and the right moment with the amputation magic, it could go down to 31 seconds, but those were rare. Then pretty soon after the 6.0 update, later that year in September, we did finally get auto farming, which I guess Summoner's War was one of the last gacha games to introduce auto farming into the game. I guess they always have been very scared of changing things. They still have that kind of mindset. But at least we did get auto farming with a 10 times auto farm. However, at those times, the dungeons were still pretty hard until the release of Seth, Tatu, Melia teams. These teams made it so much easier because doing pure damage was definitely difficult. But dealing that damage in dots was very easy. Suddenly, rune requirements did not matter that much at all. You just had to have your Lucian one-shot the waves if possible. But then it was just the Seth, Tatu, and Melia going for the cleanup. And that was pretty much the whole year of 2021 up until the very end, where this in January was a super meta team. As you can see, 24 seconds, and this was on low rune requirements. I checked all of the videos from January pretty much all the way up until November, and they were just trying to optimize this team. Is it better to be on Swift? Is it better to be on Violent? What gives me the best rotation where we do not push back the boss as much? Because there was not too many upgrades being made. There were no changes if you had better rune requirements. If you had a faster set on the set Tatu Melia, it really did not change anything. It was all about getting the right rotations at the right moment rather than rune requirements. Which also made it an era for free-to-play players to be farming as fast as any pay-to-play player. However, in November of 2021, we did manage to get to the point where we had a bit better of artifacts, so therefore the Julie could do a lot more damage to anything. And this also enabled us once again to go for a Julie plus a Lucian two-shot mechanic perfect AI state with the Sophia perfect AI, plus a double Luna for perfect AI, including the Luna taking the double turn in the mid-boss to actually have the skill 3 available on that final boss, which gave us a perfect rotation of actually being able to do runs once again in about 25 to 26 second average, which was definitely on the high end of rune requirements. It was not a lot faster than the Satatu team, but at least the very end game players had something to work for if they had the really good rune requirements to be farming a little bit faster than the free-to-play players, because in the end, Seth Tatu was probably the best free-to-play out there. However, current state of the game in 2026, free-to-play can farm very fast as well without too much efforts because we got a lot of good units, but those units we'll get to later. But this was the state of the game, November 2021. That team was very hard to rune, and everyone's trying to get upgrades on their Giants team, but getting an upgrade on the Giants team outside of the Zeta to Melia, it was just super hard to upgrade that altogether. This video is a little bit laggy, sorry for that, but this team was made by Remember YS, and it was super common already to have Trikaru, the triple Ikaru, the triple Doggo. In Dragons, we had that for the longest time already, but it was never really meta in Giants up until this team. This team was running about 26 seconds if things went wrong, but 20 seconds if things went right. And the main thing is, Belial on team-ups, the skill 1 of Belial is one of the strongest team-ups in-game, as long as there are high HP units next to the boss that you're fighting. And in the case of the final boss, that is actually one of the things that you can do, where the final boss, these crystals have about like 500k HP, and every hit from the Belial you see, it's like 90k, 50k, simply doing an insane amount of damage. So in December of 2021, this was absolutely the meta team out there. And that team actually did remain meta for pretty much most of 2022, even 2023 for a big part. There were people trying to do faster runs with Deborah. It was possible to do faster runs with Deborah, but Deborah still to this day is an overrated unit for a lot of dungeons outside of, I would say, R5, where Deborah does make your run potentially faster, but also makes it fail more often. Because as you can see with this team, sure, with Crow, if you have the right rotation, if you land those defense breaks, if the Crow does the right skill, you can do massive amount of damage. It was definitely faster for a fastest run than we had on the Belial team, but the Belial team simply was way, it was just way better. So we had Seth, Tatu, Melia on one side for free-to-play, and we had the Belial team for the pay-to-win, high-end rune requirements kind of teams, which was pretty much meta all the way up until 2023. This video, as of 2023 in January, was still based on the Melia, but it was more of an in-between team between the Belial team and the Sathatu and Melia team. This was a team where you provided a lot of dots for your Crow, and you still used the Ikaru, but maybe if you did not have the Belial, this was the free-to-play option out there where the Crow would do the proper amount of damage, and the Melia would still provide the dots if things went wrong on the final boss, so you had a safe clear right there. But it was also potential that if you landed enough dots, Crow went for a skill 3 on the Scar on that at the right moment, as you can see over here, simply cleaning the boss. So this was a really good in-betweener meta team right there in January 2023. A long run could take up to 40 seconds, but a long run on the Sathatu Melia could take up to a minute. Whereas a fast run on this had the potential to just be 25 seconds. And it was somewhat consistent on that. Then later of the year of 2023, we had on 30th of June the big update 8.0, which did also introduce Abyss Heart, which also did mean that B10 dungeons are the old B12 dungeons, and Abyss Heart is the new difficulty added to it. There were two major changes on Abyss Heart which ruined pretty much most of the team. First, you could not use any duplicates. So no more double Luna, no Trikarus, no double Ikarus, no double Crows, none of that. Second one, which was even bigger, you cannot place any dots on the bosses. So your Melia team, your Seth team, your Tatu team, none of these teams actually did work. Also, on the release of Abyss Heart, it was that difficult and not even that great for rune quality increase on drops that it was recommended for a lot of people to still farm B10 until 3 months later in 2023 November, it was updated to actually make this a lot easier. However, we did of course have some meta teams right away, which is a team that in current 2026 you're probably very familiar with. We had a 28-second average on that team, and that team was as following: Konamiya and Brillia plus your Teshar. This was also the moment that I had to answer the question the most amount of times for like answering the exact same question. I have the same speed Teshar as you, I have the same speed Konamiya as you. Why does my other unit move instead of my Teshar after my Konamiya boost? It is because of ticks, and your Brillia has to be a certain speed. At some point, it's just like Brillia has not enough speed. Like when people has told me your dungeon is not working, I was just like, okay, move your speed of Brillia to 84. It's like, why does that matter? Just do it. Hey, suddenly it works. I answered that question absolutely a million times. But to this day, this is still one of the meta teams out there. And this dates back from July of 23. So it's definitely a while running while this team has been in there. However, it was also a difficult to rune team at that time. Currently, it's a lot easier. You also had the faster version on that could go 24 to 23 second average, which was the Deborah version. However, keep in mind, Deborah, as I mentioned it before, Deborah is this overrated unit that actually can make your runs faster, but also makes it fail more often. If the Konamiya dirt in this one, you definitely had a lot more chances of fails, but the only thing is Luna did not get a double turn yet, or Luna had to take a double turn at this moment still to get the S3 available on the final stage. So therefore you were required for Luna not to take a turn in your wave 2. That was in the wave 2 in the mid boss. So therefore this team made it a little bit easier on rune requirements, but still had the chance of failing. But it was the fastest team out there in July of 2023. Team that was released in August of 2023, which was, if you do not have a Luna, how can you make it work then? What is your replacement? Well, in this case, we're using a double bird scenario. So Konamiya will boost up the Teshar, and the Tion will boost up the Homunculus to take a double turn. Why did I always like, and even till this day, like Homunculus a lot more than I like Deborah in those teams? Homunculus has that failsafe. The moment he dies, he comes back, he can finish off the boss in his final state. Definitely a bit of a slower team than what we mentioned prior, but still good enough team to have very high success rates. Of course, there were also people out there without a Teshar because you did not have that as the choice event as of 2023, or at least not as much just yet. But you had an option where you could go for a Julie, at least clearing left and right crystals, nearly taking out golems. And then you had the cleanup from the multiple turns that this Dalsim, aka Kyle, takes, where you can get enough firepower in where it does actually work. Plus, in this case, you can work with the cleanup of the Homunculus. Was a pretty solid team, was probably the best team out there if you did not have a Teshar at 2023 of September. Then in November of 2023, there was a big update fixing all of the mistakes that were made in the previous patch, where difficulty was a little bit too high, the rune drops were not that crazy, and a whole bunch of other stuff were fixed during this patch, including 30 times auto farming. It did not necessarily make any new meta teams available right away, because the best teams were still the teams that we had prior. They were just easier to rune. Up until the change of March of 2024, Luna got a buff where Luna got reduced on the cooldown on skill 3. And we mentioned Luna a few times already, where Luna had to go for skill 3, skill 2 rotation on the mid-boss to actually get her skill back. In this case, it was no longer a necessity, so you could go with this iteration where a Luna goes for skill 3 on the mid-boss, where you don't necessarily have to kill on your Tesher, and your Luna still has that skill available over here right now, which make this run a lot better, which is still one of the most meta teams. I would claim this the most meta Giants team till this day in 2026, August, as of recording this video. Which was also, funny enough, the start of the LD count. It also enabled a whole bunch more comms, such as just getting Julie in, Julie plus whatever units. It was more common to go for a Lucian on the Akamamir slot over here, but the Luna was definitely super meta again in pretty much every Giants team out there. Doesn't matter how you did the setup for cleaning the waves. It was the most meta thing out there, just to get any of your dungeon teams rolling. This already was a 20-second average team, which is faster than a lot of y'all people's teams right now. But it's just enabled by that Luna getting that buff in there, getting enough damage in, getting all of the skill 3s in every wave. And that was just one of those really big patches where we just had a big change coming in, which therefore is still meta till this day. And getting faster than 20 seconds, even till this day, is very difficult unless you have a Seraph. So a little bit of a shout out to Seraph teams over here. Seraph plus a Deborah, this was from August of 2024. This is the only way how you can actually get a faster team out there, unless you make your Julie one-shot, which in most cases in 2026 August is not really a possibility just yet. This team, it's also with the Seraph where you have a Deborah in there. I prefer a Homunculus over a Deborah in most cases because it makes things a lot more safe. However, the Seraph does have an S2 heal, and because of that S2 heal, it is good enough where it does work. Plus, that's where you get dungeon runs of 15 seconds. But you can even do faster. Which is the team that I did showcase in January of 2025 that has a Seraph plus an Uldong plus a Belial in a very specific manner. The Belial is max skilled on the skill 1, but not max skilled on the skill 2. Therefore, he will always use S2 in the mid-boss because it's in perfect eye range due to the Luna hit, but it is not having the skill active on the final boss. And on the final boss, you always want the Belial to do skill 1 because that is a massive hit that he can do. How much damage are we dealing? Good old 136k with just a skill 1. And if you deal enough damage, that could actually already take it out, which means that this is the fastest run I've ever showcased on my channel, which could even go down to a 14 or 15 second average, which is crazy. But then again, who has those two units, huh? You could also do it with the Deborah over here instead of the Uldong, but that makes it a little bit more difficult. September of 2025 is where we brought back Sigmarus. And Sigmarus plus Julie AI was for the cleanup. His skill 2 is also max HP scaling, so therefore did do a very massive hit on that mid-boss. And this was actually one of those runs that could go very fast. You saw 90 seconds just there. But once again, it's not using the Homunculus, so therefore could derp. It doesn't have the Zyrals or the Seraph for the heal. So you kind of have to place in a Homunculus on the Deborah slot. In this case, it was not really on the perfect state where it did work out. Also, you saw the derp over there, which just make this run really messed up, and where the Tesher team often is a little bit better. But this was definitely some of the faster runs out there already, which kind of just gave a deviation. What if you don't have a Tesher, or what if you want to go a little bit faster with good rune quality than the Tesher? This second, or like I think it was going down to like a 20-second team, was doing a little bit better. Plus, at this time, we did not have the decks which we have in 2026, which made it where you could use the same Julie for multiple dungeons. Then in 2025, November, we had the update of the 9th, which added the Amara's Luck. Did not necessarily change anything for Giants farming itself, but it gave you a bit of a boost for dungeon farming in general, so therefore I did want to mention it. Also, of course, it did enable scout battling, but for Giants, it was still the most farmed dungeon team out there till this day. So scout battling on Giants, most of the time, not really worth it. Do that on the other dungeons that you're not farming already. January of 2026, we do have the collab of the Lord of the Rings, and we have Frodo in the game. Frodo does enable it where you always get attack buff on your whole team. Is still used to this day. It's not the most meta team out there because, once again, it's not using the homunculus, but it does give you a chance right here to just simply have your Julie one-shot the whole waves. But you need good enough rune quality to actually make it work, because it's very good odds that it still leaves it by just a sliver of health. However, without a Teshar, this is probably still the most meta team out there, but you would have to place a homunculus on that final slot, or the Hemo, which is later added to the game. But before Hemo was added, first we have Dex, and Dex enabled for pretty much every dungeon team to have your absolute best runes added. It doesn't necessarily make a change for the fastest team out there if you already had your best runes added, which most people did do on the Giants team. But it enabled a lot more for free-to-play and newer accounts to have faster Giants teams in the first place. With the introduction of Ymel, this is probably the easiest to rune team if you don't have a Tesha. It's 22 to 25 second average, and it's just making it where you have your Luna cleaning up the whole waves after an attack buff of that Silvertail, which is the Frodo, and then you have the Luna plus the Hemo cleaning up your waves. Keep in mind, I still prefer a homunculus over a Hemo because he has that second life, whereas the Hemo, it is a way better unit if he were to always use skill 2, but his skill 1 is just a lot less damage than his skill 2. And then for July of 2026, which is pretty much just last month, best team out there right now is with the Bat. Why is this Bat so good? Well, he has pretty much a no touch or almost no animation on both skill 1 and skill 2. Skill 2 will be able to clear up after this Julie, placing everything on super low HP. Plus this skill 1 has a defense break, so you have a defense break extra chance rather than your Prillia going potentially for the derp. The only thing is that I do different from this team to the team that I'm actually running to this day, which is that Hemo is replaced by a homunculus just to give me an extra safety net. Once again, if that Hemo would always go for skill 2, I would absolutely place in the Hemo because he has just a way higher damage output. Plus a homunculus using a skill 3 in the mid boss makes it where a homunculus cannot use the skill 3 in the final boss, but a Hemo using skill 2 can use skill 2 again. And that skill 2 is a massive amount of damage, and this run actually does go down to 18 seconds, which is crazy fast. And that is how fast it has been. And that has been all of the meta teams from 2014 all the way to 2026. Hope you did enjoy this video. It took a long time researching all of the data over here because in the end, all of the videos you see over here were the videos showcased on this video just today. So I hope you appreciate that. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do this for dragons as well. And let's see if people do enjoy this video, or maybe it's not viewed at all. It was a bit of a trip through memory lane. Maybe a bit of nostalgic for people that stopped playing at some point or started playing at another. And I hope you just did enjoy. Let me know in the comments which era and which meta team was the most favorite for you for dungeon farming in Giants all the way from 2014 until 2026 and probably more years to come. Guys, see you as always in the next one.
Thanks for watching. If you would like to see more guides, join the Discord and check out the content tab for the guide video archive, which contains all of the guides that you might need. Hope to see you there.